I just want to share a very simple thought with you today as I've been reflecting on what to bring to you as a word of encouragement. And the thought that came to my mind as I was preparing to share this was the whole subject of emotions. The emotions must not rule us, but emotions are there to lead and guide us. Emotions are not a bad thing. In fact, emotions are a gift from God. If I was to ask you this question, what is the shortest verse in the Bible? And the second question, which we'll come to a bit later, what is the most commonly known verse in the Bible? Both of those interestingly come from the book of John. And what's interesting about John is this. John chapter 11 verse 35, which is the shortest verse in the Bible, tells us that Jesus wept. He wept because his friend Lazarus was dead. He wept because of the pain and the sorrow of knowing that a friend was dead. We read a little bit later in verse 38, Jesus once more, deeply moved, arrived at the tomb. And we know the end of the story. Lazarus was raised from the dead. But nonetheless, Jesus wept because of his friend's death. What's interesting about that is that this verse isn't found in Matthew or Mark or Luke, which are what are called the synoptic gospels. It's found in the Gospel of John. If you have any kind of knowledge or familiarity of the Bible, you'll know that John is the one gospel out of the four that focuses front and centre on Jesus being the Son of God. John pays very little attention to Jesus' humanity. He doesn't deny his humanity, but he doesn't focus on it. The reason that John wrote this gospel is not to explain to you and me that Jesus was a human. Jesus had human feelings, human emotions. He wants to tell us over and over again that Jesus is God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John is the book that features the I am sayings. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread of life. Of course, I am was a phrase that God used to describe himself in the Old Testament. So from John's perspective, Jesus is God. Yet we read here that Jesus wept. So when we think of emotions, sadness, anger, despair, fear, actually, we mustn't call those human emotions, or if we do call them human, we need to understand where they originate from. If Jesus, who is very much God, cried at his friend being dead, then emotions come from God. The emotions that you and I have come from God. Let me come back to describing the most well-known verse in the Bible. John chapter 3 and verse 16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son." You see, that verse for me is a verse first and foremost about emotion, an emotion that's so deep that it prompted action. Jesus so loved the world that he allowed himself to be sent to give his life for you and me. So when I say emotions mustn't rule us, you and I must never be people that allow emotions to overtake us, and people don't ever know which way we're going to react or which way we're going to turn in any given situation, of course. But we mustn't deny our emotions, particularly as people of God. We've got to allow the gift of God, which is our feelings, which is compassion, all of those things. We've got to allow those things to drive us. It tells us in one of the other Gospels that when Jesus saw the crowds, in other words, when he saw their need, he was filled with compassion. So our emotions mustn't rule us, but they must lead us. And my prayer for you and I today is that when we see situations that move us, allow ourselves to be moved. Just like the prayer or the verse in that song, Hosanna, break my heart for what breaks yours. That's a kingdom prayer. That's a godly prayer. And it's a prayer that will keep us walking in the plans and purposes of God. God bless you.